Alright everyone, today on things you would think were satire unless it were explained that it's actually totally true, the London Mayor's account on Twitter, run by Sadiq Khan of course, yesterday came out with a tweet, "Oh, nobody needs to carry a knife, there's never a good reason to carry one of those." Yes, because the knife is only for attacking people, it's the only thing that you can do with it. Well, I can think of some other reasons to carry one, like I carry one all day, every day. I always have a pocket knife on me. I have a pocket knife, a hunting knife, a bayonet, and various other bladed instruments. The reason why I have these depends on which one you're talking about. Simple pocket knife is basically, hey, I'm bored, I'm whittling wood, I'm picking at my fingernails because, I was working outside and there's dirt under them. I'm too lazy to go wash them right now because I'm just going to go out again. So I'm going to, do disgusting manly thing, basically. Hunting knife, it's, hey, I'm going for a walk in the woods. I'm probably not going to meet a rabid coyote or a bear or something, but if I do, it would be nice to have something to be able to defend myself if I can't get away. I know in the UK, maybe you don't have a problem because, you've heavily sanitized the countryside to the point where a large proportion of all of the native insects and birds and shit in England are now endangered, which a lot of people don't even know. It's like a totally sterile landscape. You look at it on Google Earth or Bing Maps or whatever you're using. You look at it from satellite and it's amazing how little actual wilderness is left. The entire UK, I believe, if I remember correctly, has about as much forested acreage as the state of Vermont, of course. The UK being considerably larger than the state of Vermont. I look outside, I see there are some areas here that I would say, oh, maybe they should have some more trees there, like maybe the middle of the Champlain Valley. The UK, meanwhile, it's like basically nothing more than artificial prairie. An area that used to be patchy forest, terminated by incredibly deep old growth. There is probably not a single old growth tree left in all of the English countryside. Yeah, the Shire, you're not. So maybe that particular problem, a bear attack or something, maybe that doesn't figure into it. I would think if I were in London, I would definitely want to carry a knife around, but you can't even get a butter knife there without a license. Now here's a microcosm of what we're trying to avoid here in the United States. You see, the English people are not citizens, they are subjects. You are subject, in the most literal sense, subjects, technically speaking, of a crown, although it's really only in spirit only. I know that you've got a representative system of government, or supposedly it represents you. We've got the same problem here, so don't, having weapons is not a magical panacea to every political problem. Trust me, I'm not going total gun friendly on that one for you. But here's the thing. Insofar as you are not allowed to defend yourself, there was a dude who got charged with murder, I think, and dragged off to the gulag there in England for defending himself, with a screwdriver, because someone was breaking into his home. He's like an old man, and now he's awaiting. Now, he's probably not going to get found guilty of murder. I think it was explained that they simply have to charge him anyway to conduct their investigation. It's like, yeah, someone breaks into your house, you don't even have a gun or a knife, you end up stabbing him to death with a screwdriver because they're attacking you. It's a pretty cut and dry case. They're not supposed to be in your house, it's your property. Wait, in the UK it's not your property, it's the Crown's property and it's sort of leased to you, I guess, through parliamentary proceedings. But this is what we're trying to avoid here. When people say, well, you're just being stupid. We need common sense gun reform. Yes, we've already passed common sense gun reform a half a dozen times. The problem is that each time common sense gun reform is passed, fewer firearms are potentially available. Some are legal, but you can't manufacture them, so you're talking about very expensive old, like retro Tommy gun or something, or a Browning that's increasingly difficult to maintain. You have de facto bans, you have bans on peripheral items and cosmetic enhancements. And the courts can barely keep up with the number of cases of this, even though they have, generally in the last decade, they've done a good job with not allowing confiscation, not allowing disarmament, not allowing anti-libertarian sort of mentality among the states and municipalities to keep passing shitty gun control that doesn't conform to the Second Amendment. What we're trying to avoid, though, is a situation where here, over the coming centuries of repeated common sense reform, we end up with a situation like the UK, where a neutered population actually calls for knives to be outright banned. Apparently, you can't even buy a knife online and have it shipped directly to you. They've got a situation like, here, You want to have a gun shipped. Now, technically speaking, if it were disassembled or something, I think, you could probably get it to another person. No one would care. Although I'm not sure. Don't trust my legal knowledge on that one. But generally, if you're mailing an operative firearm to someone, unless it's an antique, like I think it's pre 1896 or 97 or something, like really old, a really old Winchester or something, a revolver from the Civil War. Unless it's like that, like an old musket or something, you have to have a federal firearms license to even ship it. I guess you have to have a special license now to ship knives in the UK. Now, what's the difference? The government there considers that to be common sense reform. They look at the common sense reform being suggested here. They say it's weak and that it still allows people to have guns, so it's a problem. Common sense is in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. That's what we're seeking to avoid here, is the slippery slope, the slow boiling of the pepe. Boiling of the frog. That's essentially the problem we're going to have. What we need to do is slowly move in the other direction, and bit by bit we need to repeal all existing anti-firearm and anti-weapon ordinance. Like Texas, they allow swords now. I think it's great. I think all states should have a system like Texas, only it should be... Now, I think they have concealed and open carry is no longer... You don't need a license for it, but it's not even constitutional carry. We were the original gangsters of that here in Vermont. Now they're pondering whether they want to continue allowing expanded magazines. By the way, that law is toothless. It's completely toothless because it doesn't grandfather in existing ones. How are you going to prove it wasn't already in the state? Well, you can't. So somebody could have a 50-round drum I got it months before the ban passed. Yeah, it's totally legal. You didn't grandfather it in. I don't have to give it up. I can. If I need money, I can go to any police department in the state and say, hey, I'm turning this in. I want my check. Cha-ching. And then, of course, you get them online, shipped to a friend in the next state, just bring them over. It's illegal, but there's no way to enforce it because it is unenforceable. Yeah, it's just like when someone gets killed with a bicycle wheel in the UK. It's a big thing. London is increasingly a very violent place to be. I can understand that the mentality of a slave is therefore, we'll just pass more laws against weapons. The mentality of a rational person is, hey, since criminals do not follow laws, maybe it makes more sense to rescind some of this anti-weapon manifesto sort of commie bullshit, which is exactly what it is. It's funny to see bastions of Western civilization, the so-called free world, are actually the least free when it comes to these things. You've gone way off into the other direction. You overcame the problems of maybe moral traditionalism, only to fall into the trap of creating a new moral traditionalism now based on postmodernism. That's the UK's problem. That's Sweden's problem. Sweden was the first. Germany, all these countries that became so civilized and wonderful, they went from not being tolerant to being so tolerant they wiped themselves out. They went from trying, having problems with violence to suppressing it successfully. Then they teetered off into the other direction where they're so averse to the concept they won't even allow self-defense against people who are violent. They've done a great job against crime only to create new classes of criminals through overburdensome, overreaching regulation that doesn't even make any sense anymore. They managed to take care of all their legitimate social problems to the point at which it's sort of like Time Machine. You remember... the basic premise of this, I can't remember, was it Wells or one of these other authors? I know, it's been a while since I read it. It wasn't my favorite, but it did have one interesting facet. What happened is that as industrial society took hold, the underclasses sort of got pushed underground. It's a little bit like Metropolis or something. The underclasses are underground. They start to separately evolve from the sort of golden people up above, the rich people, the upper middle class, and so forth. The upper classes, they become very decadent. They become like babies almost. They're sort of depicted as being like, elf-like, semi-immortal little children. The underclasses, meanwhile, have become day-blind monsters. They become big muscle-bound hairy creatures that come out of the ground every night to eat the spawn of the rich people that can't defend themselves. They've become so decadent they don't have a concept of fighting back. They don't have a concept of anything except running and hiding. And so the violent classes, which have evolved separately, and they've out of necessity, they become violent and brutish and uncivilized. They obviously end up over time destroying the rich entirely. Then they probably starve. I guess they eat themselves, they cannibalize themselves. But that's basically the premise of part of this. And then, of course, the world ends in cold instead of global warming and desertification. It becomes nothing but an endless expanse of algae and giant crabs, actually. It's quite interesting. A cold, snowy expanse of ice and misery and bleakness for all eternity. But yes, yeah, I think the UK is definitely going in a very strange direction. We're seeing the first few cultures to have achieved post-industrial states have become extinct almost. They don't really exist as cultures, and you can't say you have a culture if you're not willing to defend any aspect of it, except you constantly tinker with things that weren't even broken to begin with. That's why I oppose any gun control here in Vermont. We already have extremely low crime rate, extremely low gun crime rate. Violent crime, as a rule, is low in Vermont, and yet we've got guns everywhere. We're the most gun-friendly state, or were until this latest bill passed. Now we're somewhere in the middle of the pack. Most gun-friendly, almost completely unregulated after the suppressor ban was abolished, which it was many months ago. Now, the only piece of anti-weapon legislation we had in the entire state involved switchblade knives of over 2.5 inches. And I guess the idea was that people were like taking on schoolyards, and it was sort of like greaser era, and so they're like, well, these punks, we need to do something about that. We're going to ban their favorite knives because we don't want them throwing knives at each other, basically, on the schoolyard. I guess that was the origin of it. That was the only piece of legislation we had. And yet we had a nice, polite society. People here in Vermont don't randomly kill each other. We haven't had a mass shooting. I think it may be a case of we've never actually had, technically speaking, a spree shooting in the state of Vermont's history. I looked it up. I couldn't find any history of anyone. If it is, it must be very old indeed, many decades ago. So so guns don't cause any problem. Knives don't cause any problem. I carry my hunting knife constantly. I carry my pocket knife constantly wherever I go. I'm always armed. Yeah, magically, I've never gone crazy and attacked somebody because I happen to own knives or a firearm. The UK can't wrap their heads around this. Sadiq Khan's crazy. But then again, he's also the kind of commie moralist, which is really what they are, postmodern idiots, really, who will take swimsuit ads off of buses, use the excuse of, oh, well, it's promoting a bad body image for females. No, it relates to your religious beliefs. He should at least be honest enough to tell people that. But he wants people disarmed because he's malevolent. The people of Western Europe have to shake themselves out of the utopian bullshit of thinking that there's nobody in the world who's actually totally malevolent. Yes, there are people who are literally psychopathic in your government, and you hand them on a golden platter the ability to abuse you. I don't consider that so intelligent as you may think. That's about all. Peace out.